Was this unexpected for you? Because we know both in terms of the demand side of the story as well as supply chain, Apple has been severely disrupted in China.
Thanks for having me on the program. This is not entirely surprising. Everybody was expecting some of the disruption in the supply chain to lead to companies, including Apple, to miss their March quarter expectation. I think the number one question is more to do with not knowing what happens to the demand. If there is a demand destruction that is going to sustain for more than 1 or 2 quarters, we could actually see more of a broad-based slowdown. If China were to consume less semiconductors, it would obviously have an adverse impact, and that's a bigger question, which I don't think we're going to know for a couple of more weeks.
Mehdi, I want to throw up this chart, which I know you can't see, but for the benefit of our viewers, just taking a look at Apple share price and where we've been trading. Of course, it was a banner year for US equities, but in particular Apple. It's the most overbought in a decade, and it has been in a lot of ways trading like a giant US consumer stock, right? So lots of questions already as to whether we might see a consolidation after the monster rally of 2019. Is this the kind of unexpected shock that's going to knock the stock off the perch?
I think that question is better asked like a month from now, when we can better gauge the impact to demand. I think some of the disruption to demand, to consumption of a smartphone or other electronic devices in China is already been anticipated. I think the key question, would this lead to a more of a broad-based slowdown, which quite frankly is very difficult to answer because we still don't know to what extent consumers are going to be out there buying smartphones or other electronic gadgets. The fact that this is viewed as an external shock that nobody was anticipating, but we don't know its impact. I think in the best case scenario, the impact will be minimized or just limited to 1 or 2 quarters, and the second half will be better than expected because some of the demand and the supply disruption will be pushed out to the second half. In a worst-case scenario, this would lead to a more of a broad-based slowdown. The people who are not buying iPhone would obviously have an adverse impact on the supply, and the factories that make the iPhone, the factories that make the semiconductor chips, that they would all see a broader weakness, which could lead to a more of a broad-based consumer, more of a broad-based disruption to the demand. So I think it's more of a demand question, but I don't think we have all the answers to answer the underlying question whether this is disruptive.
So how much of that demand weakness can be offset by some other strong points in Apple's products, including services?
I'm not sure if outside of China and whether services could help offset that, because the question is more than just Apple, and I think Apple, it's pretty much a tip of the iceberg. I think other companies will come out and use the Apple as an excuse to reset the bar. The key question is to what extent this is more of a destruction in demand. Even if Apple is able to offset lower iPhone ship or lower iPhone demand in China by services, what about the rest of the consumer electronics? That's a bigger, broader question, which ultimately will come back to bite Apple. If there is more of a slower global economy, there will be more of a fewer iPhones sold outside of China, and will come back to hurt Apple. So again, this is more of a question on demand and whether the coronavirus would be a big enough a shock to the entire global economy that would cause a slowdown globally, and I don't think we have all the answers yet.
Sure, but for now, could we just say that at least on the supply side of things, that new low-cost iPhone that we're all expecting to be manufactured this year would be put off?
Of course. And it's pushed out to the second half, and this is why the market has read through it. And we have known about the coronavirus for a couple of weeks, and the market keeps setting the new high. The question is, what happens to consumers in China? Would they come back and be buying more of a consumer electronics like iPhone to make up for any consumption or any purchases over the past month or so? And we don't have those answers.